So we're speaking this morning on inclusive leadership. Inclusive leadership. Inclusive leadership. And inclusive simply means to include or to involve others. Inclusive leadership. And I'll just lay the foundation for inclusive leadership. It is love. The capacity to love. I tell leaders everywhere, if you find yourself in a leadership position and you realize that you don't have love for people, I say to leaders, go on sabbatical. Take a break. Go and find the capacity to love and come back. I said, because without that capacity to love, your failure is already guaranteed. Because leadership is about people. Leadership is about people. No wonder when someone asked Jesus Christ, which is the greatest commandment, he said it is love. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Because the most important dimension to life is relationships. And the basic principle that governs relationships is love. So there can be no inclusive leadership without love. Inclusive leaders are persons who are aware of their own biases and prejudices, but intentionally seek out and consider different paths to guide their decision-making process and to collaborate better with others. We all grew up with biases. We grew up with prejudices. They seep into our hearts at a subconscious level. At a subconscious level. Our parents have issues with some people. Those issues, those prejudices, seep into our own hearts at a subconscious level. If they belong to a particular tribe, that tribe has problems with another tribe. They don't need to teach us to hate people of another tribe. All we need to do is just grow up normally in the family, and we will be absorbing it. Absorbing their hurts, absorbing their pains, absorbing their prejudices. So sometimes we grow up at a subconscious level, unconsciously believing, men are superior to women. Anyone that comes from this tribe is a bad person. I remember just before I got married, my parents came to visit me in Lagos. I grew up in the middle part of Nigeria, and they came on a visit. And after the service, now I was pastoring the branch church of a church. After the service, so I said to them, I've met someone that I want to marry. They just turned and looked at each other. What I did not realize, that was what they came to discuss with me. They came to recommend the daughter of their bosom friend for me to marry. I didn't know, but I just quickly said, I found somebody else I was going to marry. I said, okay. You know the first question they asked me? Where is she from? When I said it, the two of them just said, at the same time, at a subconscious level. You know why? People from my area believe that women that come from her part of our country are very diabolical. That they use juju, that they seize the brain of their husbands. So once somebody marries from that part of the country, especially a man, you marry a woman from that part, you will not think straight anymore. And I now said, that's where she's from. They just said, So that's it. Inclusive leaders are people that acknowledge that fact. We grow up with prejudices of some sort. And then you develop what we call self-awareness, where you sit down to reflect and to think about the way you are thinking. The way the human brain is designed. Once you've thought about something for some time and it becomes routine, either the thinking or the doing becomes routine, it moves down to the subconscious to free the mind to attack fresh problems. That one that has gone into the subconscious puts your life on autopilot. It is more dangerous than conscious thinking. So sometimes, like we just started a new year, right? Many people make New Year resolutions. A lot of New Year resolutions. Why is it that many New Year resolutions don't work? Because 2 weeks, 3 weeks into the year, the subconscious is actually the one that will determine what you're going to do. Autopilot. Sometime last year in Atlanta, my wife and I decided we were going to eat at a restaurant. The restaurant is close to a shopping mall. It's not the only restaurant there. So as we were going on the way, we were discussing. I was so engrossed in the discussion. In fact, both of us were so engrossed in the gist or gisting that unconsciously, I just drove to the parking lot of the mall, close to another restaurant, which is the one we visit more often. It was when we drove into the car park, when I drove into the car park, that both of us just said at the same time, what are we doing here? At an unconscious level, out of habit, I just drove to the one we normally go. We found ourselves, and then we now went to the one that we really wanted to go. There are many people who ask themselves that question in life because where they find themselves is not where they want to go. Because at the point of making decisions every day, it is the subconscious that actually kicks in. So once in a while, a leader needs to do that kind of reflection. You need to bring things out from your subconscious level. Ask yourself, how am I thinking? Why do I think the way I think? Why do I think men are superior to women? Why do I think that one tribe is superior to the other? Because that's the challenge of the average African. Too many things that divide us. Why do I think this way? Why do I think that way? Right? Why do I think it is difficult to get money? Why do I think this? Why do I think that? We need to think about the way we are thinking. So, inclusive leaders are people that identify their own prejudices and that deal with those prejudices. Because once you consider someone to be superior to the other, once as a leader you have people you like, you have the ones you don't like, it's going to reduce the quality of your leadership. So when you have identified what you absorbed, the prejudices that you absorbed, that you grew up with, the next thing is you need to experience emotional healing. We need to be healed. Too many people fighting battles that is not their business. Whatever happened between this family and that family happened 2 generations ago. Right now, people are being bitter with someone that did not offend them just because your parents told you some history of what their family did to your family 2 centuries ago. So we need healing. It's amazing how somebody is offended by one person and then we generalize. That is how all men behave. No, all men cannot behave in one way. That's how women behave. Women are, that's too broad a statement to make. There are billions of women in the world. So we need to be healed, right? And we point out some dimensions to the healing. Because it is when we have been healed that we can develop empathy, the ability to put ourselves in somebody else's position and to feel what they feel. We develop capacity for service. Healed leaders are able to serve others, to add value to others. And healed leaders are able to deal with people with honesty. They're able to relate with others with honesty. You don't have to be lying. You don't have to be pretending. You said this thing to one person. Now you are saying it to somebody else. You are saying another thing simply because you have issues with them. Characteristics of inclusive leaders. And this is the first thing, caring about others. Genuinely caring about others. Leaders that are not inclusive play dangerous politics. They introduce dangerous politics into their teams. They're the ones that create division in their teams. Because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. When you really believe that one person is inferior, it will show in your attitude. It will show in your actions. As much as you try to mask it. Genuinely caring for persons. That leadership is about people. Genuinely caring for people. Being others-centered, right? Inclusive leaders genuinely love people. You know, I point out how Jesus Christ said to his disciples, you know that I have loved you. Love one another like that. And I say, the disciples he was talking to were men. It is easy for men to tell women, I love you. But for a man to tell another man, I love you, that's not easy. And Jesus is saying to 12 grown men, you know that I have loved you. Love one another like that, right? So, that genuine love and care all right. Good. And then we talked about being vulnerable. Being vulnerable. Now, being vulnerable is being willing to admit your weaknesses before others. It is when you're preferring someone over somebody else, that's when you will be honest with some and not be honest with others. And then you'll be afraid to show your humanity. Who gave us the impression that leaders are supposed to be perfect? I grew up believing that. You know, they call it leadership presence. You need to show up strong. I don't know where I got the idea from. That when you're a leader, you have to, show, in fact, the way you show the strength, you make people afraid. So whenever I imagined myself then as a teenager, that when I would have my own family as the father of the house, whenever I arrived from work, what I was dreaming in my head then was that I would rev the engine of my car. Whenever I arrived, I would do vroom, 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 before I put the car off. That the children will hear inside and disappear. Dive for cover. Because the lion of the tribe of our house has arrived. Where did I get that impression from? Honestly, that's how many people lead. That's how many people lead their teams in organizations. There's just that belief that people should be afraid of us. And once we're in that frame of mind, how can we be vulnerable? So that's why even when we're wrong and other people can see that we're wrong, we refuse to admit it. But I'll tell you where it changed for me. I was reading a book by Pastor David Cho of South Korea. God bless him. In eternity, built the largest single congregation in the world. And then I saw him, in the book, he was admitting some of his mistakes. I could not believe it. The pastor of the biggest church in the world, 1 million members, writing that he went to Japan to preach. There were 2,000 pastors there at the conference. When they introduced him, he said he got to the podium and that for 5 minutes he could not talk. He was just looking at them. They were wondering what the problem was. This man has just been introduced as the pastor of the biggest church in the world. He did not say anything. 5 minutes. Eventually, when he spoke, he said to them, I am sorry, but I hate you Japanese. When I hear that an earthquake has happened in Japan, I am happy. When I hear that something bad happened to Japan, he said, I am happy. He said, when he started like that, they were shocked. Did you say this man is a pastor? He said, this is why you Japanese overran my country. You Japanese overran my country. When the Americans dropped bombs on your country, the atomic bomb, most people don't know that a lot of the people that died there were South Koreans. You people packed my people. You used us as slaves. So I'm bitter. And there's no way I'm going to be able to preach to you people here today except God heals me and does something about it. He went silent. He said somebody just stood up from the back, walked to the front, and said, we're sorry. We're sorry. Our forefathers did not tell us. See, our parents did not tell. It is not in the history books that we read in the schools that our people did such damage to your people. Can you forgive us? The other people came, one by one like that. Long queue. They were coming, they were saying, we're sorry. We're sorry. And he said as they were doing that, you know, he looked at them, love welled up in his heart. He said he just felt like a hand entered his brain, pulled something out. That pain, that hurt, that memory, that thought, he said, God just pulled it out. He said the power of God just hit him. And that he just told them, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please take your seats. Everything is okay now. God has healed me. And he went ahead and preached for 2 hours. Right? But his healing started with vulnerability. Nobody goes to a doctor to hide their sickness. How will you be healed? Why the pretense? So I, young pastor just starting out, I read that story and I thought, this man is making a mistake. Didn't he know they're going to read this book all over the world? Why should such a powerful pastor be admitting his mistakes and be writing them in the book? Another of his books, I read another story. They used to have prayer meeting 5:30 a.m. every day in their church. One day, he overslept. The phone was ringing in his house. His mother-in-law was one of his associate pastors. So he said, when he woke up, he picked the phone. The mother-in-law said, Pastor, what are you doing at home? Everybody's here. We're waiting for you to come and lead the prayer. He said he just dropped the phone and ran out. You know, quickly refreshed, ran to the church, ran straight on the stage. He said when he got on the stage, praise the Lord, everybody, as he was talking, the people were not listening to him. They were just laughing. They were looking at themselves and laughing. They would look at him, they would laugh. So he stopped. He said, what is it? He did not realize that in his haste to get out of the house, even though he changed his shirt and whatever, he did not change the pant. So the shirt and the jacket was on pajamas. So I read that again. I said, what's wrong with this man? Why are you writing things like that in a book that you know is going all over the world? I then read in another of his books. He said, people wonder why I am open to admit my mistakes. He said, I found out it does not make your people to lose respect for you. It actually builds trust between you and your people. I said, wow, wow, wow. Inclusive leaders are vulnerable. Inclusive leaders focus on giving, not getting. They know that everyone is deserving of giving. The proof of love is giving. For God so loved the world that he gave. The proof that you love is giving. Love, my own definition, is recognizing the value of another person and celebrating that value. When you recognize that each human being was created in the image and likeness of God, you will never treat another human being with disrespect. Every human is an extension of God. That's why when they asked Jesus Christ, which is the greatest commandment, he said, love God, love your neighbor. He said the two of them are on the same plane. Later, John, that was there when Jesus was saying it, explained it better in 1 John chapter 4, verses 20 and 21. He said, you cannot say that you love God and not love man. You cannot say that you love God and not love man. Every human is an extension of God. So whatever you will not give God, don't give man. I say this is the way everyone should do their job. If your job is to clean chairs, clean the chair as if it's God that will sit on it. Nobody will ever accuse you of doing a shoddy job. Clean the chair as if it is God that will sit on it. So the proof of love is give. Inclusive leaders give. Inclusive leaders seek the good of others. They just want improvement for everyone. Inclusive leaders sacrifice. Inclusive leaders sacrifice. When I move around anywhere in Africa, I promise you, I'm very honest, my heart breaks. My heart breaks because when I look at the poor conditions of our people, the poor quality of life, the poor quality of facility, I know the problem is not money. I know the problem is that somebody does not believe that the average person in Africa deserves better. That's the problem. It's not lack of money. It is lack of value for human life. Sometimes government wants to execute a project and the project is paralyzed simply because if you do the project here, the other tribe will believe that they're cheating them or something. It's amazing. And I mean, because I have friends in government up to the highest level, I hear the back end stories of what happens to some of those projects. Some of them are stranded 20 straight years. They're unable to execute something. Simply because somebody somewhere is busy, they are busy contesting between one tribe and the other. That's just crazy. Right? So, inclusive leaders want life to improve for everyone. And then the next one is active listening. Active listening. Most of us don't listen. We hear. Active listening is different from hearing. I was guilty of this, and I'm still guilty of this sometimes, right? That someone is talking to you. Most of the time, We're hearing what the person is saying, but we're not listening. What we're doing is preparing what we would say when the person has stopped talking. And that's why we missed the point, because we actually did not listen carefully enough to understand what the person was saying. So, inclusive leaders engage in active listening. And then everything culminates in this big word, trust. When a leader is inclusive, when a leader loves everyone equally, loves the men and women equally, loves people from different tribes equally, loves people from different religions equally, you find out people trust the leader. In Africa, the level of trust is low. And trust is called social capital. I know chairman trusts me. If I tell him, chairman, can you loan me $100,000? I will return your money in 6 months' time. The likelihood is that he will loan me the money because I've not lied to him before. Because that's how trust is built, consistency. Now, the level of trust is low around. So, inclusive leadership actually builds trust in the system. Inclusive leadership is linked to servant leadership because the focus of the leader is on helping everyone to improve. Helping everyone to improve. Inclusive leadership allows you to love your neighbors, to be no evil, to show love, and to show empathy. Inclusive leadership makes you sensitive to the needs of other people. In our church, I had to impose a policy on the people that lead worship. If you take a song from one tribe, the next song must come from another tribe. This church must not be labeled by a tribe. Let other people feel included. So when a leader is inclusive, then you are sensitive, like that. I remember at our last leadership conference in November, one of our speakers, when she started speaking, very powerful presentation, but then she was speaking more of our tribe. My wife wrote a note, and she's a comedian, right? She's very famous, has millions of followers on social media. My wife wrote a note to her and said, please, translate whatever you say in Yoruba language to English for the sake of those that don't understand. Your mama, thank you. And someone went on the stage and went to drop the message for her. She took it, she read it. Being the comedian that she is, she read it out. Read it out to everybody. That goes back to a quality I mentioned earlier on, vulnerability, right? Because ordinarily she was supposed to read it quietly, keep it there, and then adjust. She read it out to everybody. Everybody laughed over it, but she adjusted after that, right? Inclusive leadership wins with love through service. They create an atmosphere of trust for their employees to create, innovate, and exchange ideas without fear. You mentioned that, I mentioned earlier on about how I thought leadership meant to create terror for the people following me. But once there's fear like that in the system, people can't work with their best ideas. So when the leader shows no partiality, no prejudice, then people experience freedom in their minds. They can come up with their best ideas and they can better innovate. Inclusive leadership is an authentic leadership style that rules out any discrimination, bias, and favor based on race, gender, ethnicity, or religion. no discrimination. No discrimination. I have a sister who used to work with us, and then one day, my other sister, her older one, came to meet her in the office, and they fought. They quarreled at our front desk. And at the end, when I heard the one working with us, I called her to my office. I said, you must never try that again. I said, I'll fire you, and I'll help you to get work somewhere else. That the fact that you are my sister here does not give you any special position. I don't do discrimination here. This place is principle-centered, right? No discrimination here. Inclusive leaders crave diversity. Because the beautiful thing actually is that the more difference you have on your team, the more creative the team is going to be. The more perspectives you're going to have when you're trying to solve problems. So inclusive leaders actually love diversity. 5 disciplines of inclusive leadership quickly. Trust, we've discussed that. Diversity, nurturing talent. You have an adaptive mindset. You are flexible. You don't think only one way. That's the essence of leadership. A leader is just a broker of talents and ideas. That's why they think you are smart, because you are busy getting from everybody else, right? And then at the end of the day, transformation happens in the group because you are getting superior ideas from different parts, you know. For example, I'm inspired when I come here and I see the role that women play here in Just Pong Group. In Africa, it is especially commendable. Especially commendable. Now, look at all our institutions, from government down to everywhere. It's men that you will find everywhere at the top, right? But when you include other people, I know the difference it makes when my wife attends a meeting, our management team meeting, that she's just present, because the way she sees things is just completely different. And sometimes we men will have been discussing and everything will be looking smooth. When she talks, everything will just collapse, because he will just introduce another perspective altogether. But that's what actually saves us from failure and embarrassment. Traits, thank you. Traits of an inclusive leader. Courage. Cultural agility, that you are able to adjust. You admit everybody is not the same. Cultures are different, and you're able to accommodate other cultures, right? Commitment. Commitment. Leaders are willing to make whatever sacrifice. Inclusive leaders make sacrifice for the success of the team. They value collaboration. 2 are better than 1, always. They celebrate curiosity. Ask questions. Let people ask questions. The older generation in Africa doesn't like people asking questions. We don't like being queried. But for God's sake, that's the only way we improve. Curiosity. So I conclude with this: love is the essence of inclusive leadership in the leader-follower relationship, since it remains the foundation and ultimately delivers solid business results. As one that, engages so many leaders across the world, I find out it disturbs people when you bring up the word love in the boardroom. Love in management circles. It sounds too soft, right? Sounds too weak. But honestly, that's where the power is. We're in the post-COVID era, and I noticed something. And I've been advising leaders. We had better adjust. The world has changed. COVID changed human psyche. It changed human psychology. When we went through that frightening and threatening season, leaders had to make decisions because almost everyone alive had never experienced something like that before. had never experienced a pandemic, a global pandemic. And as leaders were making decisions, their value systems were coming to the fore. And many people saw that leaders value money and profit over human life. Many people saw that leaders valued power over human life because they just wanted to win elections and so on. And that was when people started making decisions for themselves. I'm not going to leave my life in the hands of these guys anymore. I need to think for myself. So a lot of people resigned their jobs and things like that. So I'm saying to leaders more than ever before, we need to love people now. And we need to love people genuinely. Inclusive leaders love others without discrimination. Whether we realize it or not, it's going to have impact on our business results. Thank you.